I would also add, there's this question of whether we'll see governments around the world starting to add Bitcoin to their own balance sheets. I would say that that possibility is not priced into the market at all. If that becomes a reality, I think you're talking about Bitcoin being many hundreds of thousands of dollars. There's just not enough Bitcoin in the world to support, to facilitate that kind of demand without prices going substantially higher. So I think this is a real sea change. I think investors have underestimated it. I think it's going to have a long tail effect. It'll extend the bull market substantially in 2025 and potentially beyond. I'm hugely excited about it. I think eventually you're going to see a Mag 7 company own substantial amounts of Bitcoin on their balance sheet.
One of Hougan's boldest predictions revolves around the potential for governments to add Bitcoin to their balance sheets. This possibility, which remains largely unpriced by the market, could send Bitcoin's value skyrocketing into the hundreds of thousands of dollars. The supply constraints of Bitcoin, coupled with rising demand, create a perfect storm for explosive price growth. While the initial wave of interest was heavily driven by retail investors, comprising about 70 to 80% of ETF participation, Hougan predicts a significant shift toward institutional involvement. By 2025, he expects institutional investors to dominate the space, potentially leading to inflows that dwarf the impressive $40 billion seen in 2024. This development underscores the long-term trajectory of Bitcoin ETF as a cornerstone of mainstream crypto adoption.
Please take a little time to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on post notifications for more videos like this. You can also check out our other videos on cryptocurrencies and the overall digital asset space and drop your comments and observations in the comments section below. Everything you do helps with the YouTube algorithm and immensely contributes to the channel's growth. Thanks and enjoy the video.
I think the important thing to note, you said broke every record. It shattered them, as you mentioned. It's not even close. It's orders of magnitude bigger. You take the best performing financial asset of all time, which is Bitcoin, and you take a 10-year delay for demand to build up and a huge audience of people who don't feel comfortable buying Bitcoin any other way, and you put them together and it's just a spectacular result. Of course, there were other elements, right? There was what was going on with MicroStrategy pushing prices higher. There was what was going on with the US election pushing prices higher. But there was just huge pent-up demand. The thing I always come back to is the vast majority of investors still have zero exposure to Bitcoin. That has to change, right? Most investors are going to end up owning Bitcoin. The ETF was the first release valve to see that happen, and that led to this spectacular result. It's starting to change in the direction of more balanced. If you look at most ETFs globally, they vary by ETF, but it's fairly typical to have about half from retail and half from institutional. And that's the direction of travel we're seeing on these Bitcoin ETFs. You're seeing the share of institutional demand tick up a little bit. We're still in the high 70s on retail, but I think that will really start to change when we get the Q4 numbers. You get those reporting about 6 weeks in arrears. So we'll get the Q4 numbers in mid-February. I think you'll start to see it more like 75-25. And then over the course of the year, that's going to balance out more towards 50-50. The important thing there is that what that tells you is we've set these records and the real institutional demand has only just started to trickle in. So it tells you that this inflow has a long way to go. I expect the $40 billion we see to be eclipsed significantly in 2025. I expect more inflows in 2025 than 2024. And it's because those institutions are really going to start to buy in mass. Long term, that's where most of the demand is going to be. If you look in the traditional sort of equity space, people don't buy one stock. They tend to buy an index fund. That's going to be true in crypto as well. There have been a couple products. Bitwise has an application, which I can't speak to specifically, but there have been a couple filings to launch these index-based ETFs. You got to remember, most traditional investors don't live in this world like I do. They think about crypto, a few minutes a week. They just want exposure. And for these people, an index-based products that'll be mostly Bitcoin, some Ethereum, and then some exposure to Solana and other altcoins will be the perfect product for them. And I think they'll attract tens of billions of dollars of inflows over time. One of the biggest trends last year was corporations buying Bitcoin. MicroStrategy gets all the press But there are dozens of companies beyond MicroStrategy that are moving on to this sort of Bitcoin standard of keeping their corporate treasury in Bitcoin, both public companies and then of course private companies as well, like Bitwise. But we, think there is demand to invest in these companies that recognize that holding traditional cash on a balance sheet is a losing proposition, right? Fiat currency loses value over time. So why do America's public companies and the world's public companies hold trillions of dollars in an asset that is depreciating over time? The smarter companies are moving on to this Bitcoin standard. So without talking about, again, the specific filing, which we made and you can see at the SEC site, we think there is substantial demand to invest in these Bitcoin standard style companies. And we think it's a real differentiating factor, right? I think these are companies that get it. They see what's happened with the money printing. They see what's happening with fiat currencies worldwide. They're opting out of it onto a Bitcoin-based treasury strategy. And we think, though, those kind of companies will be rewarded in the future. I think people have underestimated the degree of this change, right? I mean, crypto has been seen in a negative light by governments for the last decade. It's been fighting uphill. And it's not just gotten to neutral, it's gotten to overtly positive. You mentioned, of course, the Trump takeover has its own crypto czar. And in Canada, as you mentioned, the leading candidate is overtly pro-Bitcoin. Canada was like the anti-Bitcoin a few years ago. You remember the trucker protests and all of that. And now to see a potential prime minister who is pro-Bitcoin, I think people have dramatically underestimated the scale of this. I would also add, there's this question of whether we'll see governments around the world starting to add Bitcoin to their own balance sheets. I would say that that possibility is not priced into the market at all. Like zero. If that becomes a reality, I think you're talking about Bitcoin being many hundreds of thousands of dollars. There's just not enough Bitcoin in the world to facilitate that kind of demand without prices going substantially higher. So I think this is a real sea change. I think investors have underestimated it. I think it's going to have a long tail effect. It will extend the bull market substantially in 2025 and potentially beyond. I'm hugely excited about it.
One of the most transformative aspects of Hougan's analysis is the explosive potential of stablecoins. With their ability to facilitate frictionless, low-cost transactions, stablecoins are disrupting traditional financial systems, including credit card networks that charge exorbitant fees. Hougan predicts stablecoin adoption will surge globally, especially in regions with unstable currencies. This growth will not only provide financial inclusion, but also drive the development of modern financial infrastructure. By 2025, stablecoins could achieve a market cap exceeding $1 trillion, reshaping commerce and cross-border transactions.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to realize who aren't in the traditional equity world that voting in traditional stocks is not like voting in crypto. Voting in crypto has real community engagement. People are engaged, they think about it. Most voting in the traditional equity world uses these proxy voting providers who are institutional consultants, the most TradFi of TradFi institutions as well. So when you see a vote like that, you shouldn't interpret it as actual Microsoft's shareholders only 0.5%. It's really that the institutional capital outsources voting and these TradFi suits just reflexively vote with the company. I think eventually you're going to see a Mag 7 company own substantial amounts of Bitcoin on their balance sheet. These are tech adjacent firms. Maybe it's not Microsoft, maybe it's Meta, maybe it's another firm, but I think you're going to start to see this happen. This has gone from a sort of crazy idea that only Michael Saylor was doing to an idea that now dozens of companies are doing. I think it will be hundreds of companies, and I think they'll be buying hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin per year. It's sort of another source of insatiable demand for Bitcoin. These demand curves are exponential, which means even in the early phases when they're building, you barely notice because it's going from a few million to like maybe 5 or 6 million. You start to see it, and then it escalates like that. And that's what we're going to see on Ethereum. There are a couple reasons for that. One is that, as you know, whenever an investor comes into crypto through Bitcoin, it sort of marinates for a while, and then they start to learn more about crypto. And then 6 to 12 months later, they buy Ethereum and other altcoins. That's happened for 15 years in crypto. And of course, it's going to happen with ETFs. So you get this echo boom. But I'm also just organically excited about where Ethereum is and where it's going in 2025. I think the setup is extremely strong to benefit from agentic AI, to benefit from stablecoin demand, to benefit from tokenization. All of those play directly into Ethereum, more so than any other programmable blockchain. So I think there's both this sort of natural increase in demand for the ETF, and then these huge catalysts from what I expect to happen in 2025. So I'm really bullish on ETH inflows in 2025. They all want in on this massive, profit potential in the stablecoin space. We've mentioned before that there's some quarters where Tether makes more money than Goldman Sachs. US banks don't like that. They want to make that money for themselves. I think you'll see multiple banks launch stablecoins. I think by the end of this year, we could be paying for certain things with stablecoins on a regular basis. I think by next year, you might be paying for things on Amazon with stablecoins at a discount to their price if you use a traditional credit card. Sometimes I like to think about things in the world that don't make any sense. One thing in the world that doesn't make any sense is the take rate for credit cards on every transaction being north of 2%. And that is just so beyond absurd in today's day and age. I think that's going to be disrupted substantially. I think we could be at $1 trillion in stablecoins by the end of next year. I think people underestimate the impact of stablecoins in the US. And then when you go globally, it's that, but on steroids, right? They have, when you go outside of a country like the US with a relatively well-established financial system, you get all of those cost savings benefits, plus you get modern financial infrastructure and a currency that debases at a lower rate than local currencies. And the growth there can be exponential as well. So I really think it's one of the greatest advances in crypto. I think it's going to be massive. And I think it's going to hockey stick up almost immediately as the Trump administration takes over. Yeah, it's a no-brainer. And it's also a massive humanitarian benefit for the people of those countries who have had no other choice. That's the thing that people don't get about crypto, is it just offers a choice. You think about somebody in a country with a poor currency that's been facing inflation throughout their lifetime, that's probably seen multiple devaluations, that pays high fees for any sort of financial transaction. And all of a sudden they have access to stablecoins, which is the US dollar that moves frictionlessly around the world. It's a massive humanitarian benefit. I mean, it's just incredible for the world. And you can see it having real world impact. I mean, Stripe paid, $1.1 billion for Bridge. It's a massive acquisition because stablecoins are so important to the future of commerce internationally. I always try not to be too bullish, but it's hard not to be too bullish on stablecoin growth. I really think it could be $1 trillion easily by the end of next year. And there's probably upside to that beyond that. It's an incredible killer app, an incredible gift for the world.
One of the most transformative aspects of Hougan's analysis is the explosive potential of stablecoins. With their ability to facilitate frictionless, low-cost transactions, stablecoins are disrupting traditional financial systems, including credit card networks that charge exorbitant fees. Hougan predicts stablecoin adoption will surge globally, especially in regions with unstable currencies. This growth will not only provide financial inclusion, but also drive the development of modern financial infrastructure. By 2025, stablecoins could achieve a market cap exceeding $1 trillion, reshaping commerce and cross-border transactions.